Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lookout. If you're just joining us, where have you been? We're going to talk today about the progression of the Palisades Fire. My name's Zeke Lunder. I'm a wildfire analyst and geographer. Been working in fire mapping for most of my adult life, and we use open source intelligence and other sources of public information to do education on how fires spread. So that's kind of the point of today's lecture here, is just to kind of look at how the fire spread and talk about kind of what maybe we can take away from some of this stuff, lessons learned, and just also to kind of show you guys examples of how technology gets used to tell these stories and also to manage the incidents. And I may talk a little bit about the limitations of technology when it comes to stopping future fires. So without further ado, I'm going to share a map here from, this is from the CAL FIRE incident management team that's working on the fire. And they're mapping the fire every day. And then usually as the fire starts to wind down, someone will get tasked to build a progression map. And so that's what this is. And it shows colors for each kind of burning period. And oftentimes the data, we don't always get data every single day. Sometimes the plane that flies the fire breaks down, or sometimes we get data several times a day. So it's not always a set kind of interval that we get the information. But usually as the fire starts to wind down, they'll start making some maps that are not just focused on the operations. And these maps are always interesting. So I'd have a legend up here, but I found the legend that was with the map as it was published is it's not accurate. So just to kind of set the stage here, we'll look at the whole fire and then we'll zoom in. So we've got Malibu over here, behind my head, down there. And we've got Santa Monica over here. And we've got Pacific Palisades here, and then in here we've got kind of the Summit neighborhood. And so the fire started up by Skull Rock, above the Summit neighborhood. And this dark blue is kind of the first perimeter. And that's the fire as it was mapped kind of early in the afternoon on the 7th. From there, the fire kind of jumped across Topanga Canyon Road. And it also, oh no, it's Topanga Canyon Road here. What's Palisades? Let me turn the road on here because I'm not the local. Here's Sunset Boulevard down through here. So pretty early on, the fire jumped Palisades Drive. It was on both sides. These areas that are blank, some of those areas escaped the fire spread. So the first night, the fire pushed hard down Temescal Canyon Road all the way to the coast. And then the next time the fire was mapped, it had spread through this whole area. So we didn't get a perimeter, kind of this main area of green. The fire spread almost all this way in the first day. By the next morning, the fire was almost all the way to Malibu. And also it pushed all the way down to the coast. So there's kind of a gap in there in the mapping. But then that was like a huge amount of the initial spread was just done there after the first day and night. A lot of this area in green was burned. And then a lot of the rest of the fire was what we call backing fire, kind of into the wind and with the terrain. So I'll turn on the legend we have here. I'm not sure where that is. I apologize if the legend's missing. Another really interesting thing that happened, there's a fire here that happened in 2021 in blue, and that's kind of above the Summit neighborhood. And so that denuded a lot of this area from, and kept the fire from really spreading into there. So even without a lot of direct firefighting, when the fire kind of came around above the Summit neighborhood and burned from this direction up towards Topanga, it couldn't really burn in here because a lot of this didn't have any fuel, or not much fuel, because it was only like 3 years old burn. So on the second and third day of the fire, they started pushing a bulldozer line up this ridge here, kind of between Mandeville Canyon and the next canyon to the north. And they pushed dozers on this ridge and put down a ton of retardant. And we just got some really cool imagery that shows what the landscape looks like now after the fire. And so they had bulldozer line in here. And the fire, it crossed that line on like the third night. So the fire was kind of holding down in the bottom of the canyon here. And that gave them time to prep this ridge with both bulldozers and retardant. And then the fire kind of squirted out. It backed down across the canyon here, and it got across the canyon, and it ran up and across this line. And so that was the kind of secondary evacuations that happened on the 405 corridor, was one, because they were hoping to hold it here and across the top here. And we were kind of covering that. We were watching the retardant drops on the satellite, or on the internet, and we could see that they were painting the top of the ridge here along Mulholland Drive Trail and down this ridge. But the fire did kind of squirt up out of here, and then it started to kind of, the worry was that we were supposed to have renewed strong offshore winds, and that this newly established fire here would push down hard into Mandeville Canyon. And so as you can see on this imagery that's just a couple days old, they just they were able to paint the flanks of that fire super heavily with aircraft and retardant, and keep it here out of this Mandeville Canyon neighborhood almost completely. And so that was really a big win as far as the firefight went, was that they were able to hold it out here above the West Ridge neighborhood. And that really, that was a really critical part of the evolution of this incident, because you see, we had the strong winds coming down the canyon, and it could have blown down here really into Brentwood, and really just, if they had lost control of it there, it could have pushed back all the way out down towards Santa Monica. So once they got that side wrapped here, they'd been working on, there was a bulldozer line that was established along the top of the ridge here. And we watched that, this orange area was lit. It was backfired from the dozer line. And so we were watching that evolve on the webcams. And you can see, if we zoom in here, you can really see, like, this is a pretty narrow ridge. And so the bulldozers, there wasn't a lot they could do once they kind of widened out the ridgeline road. But on this imagery, you can actually see like the fire trucks and crew buggies out here from them working on mopping up the fire. So this was, they applied retardant on the outside of the ridge here along Mulholland Drive Trail, and lit what we'd call, backfires or firing operations along through here to get out, because the fire was at that time burning out in here. So as they were lighting these backfires here, the fire had progressed out to this orange area. And so as we talked about then, the name of the game with firing operations is to get your area of the fire line burnt out before the fire gets there. So the fire was out in here. They fired this ridge out to here. And they had to hold up their firing. And then the next day, they managed to get the rest of this fired, but the fire slopped over here on the kind of very top of the fire. And so you can see then where that slop over happened. I was worried when that happened that they wouldn't be able to get kind of a direct attack on that, and that they'd have to back off and work farther out if they couldn't get a direct attack. But they are able to get a ton of retardant painted in there, like an enormous amount of retardant. And then that retardant subdued the fire enough that it could actually come in here and scratch a hand line along the edge of this area, which is just really steep and poor access. And then, as we mentioned on the broadcast, they plumbed that, so they're able to put water tanks, like engines or water tanks up here, and run hoses across this entire bottom and secure that. So you can see still, when this imagery was taken, there's still a lot of the crew vehicles from them out kind of patrolling that. So we have some imagery that was shot last, here's a map that is hotspot mapping that was shot last night. It was shot this morning at, last night at about 10:30. And so that shows the whole fire, and it shows all these red dots out here are places that are still showing up as hot on infrared. So we've got kind of Fernwood and Topanga out here, and this is the area we just went through, looking at where their line kind of slopped down off below the canyon. So it's showing scattered heat where this red hatch is, and then out here, the only heat that they're picking up with their infrared are these red dots. So you can still have heat interior of the fire, but if they don't find any heat like within a certain margin of the perimeter, they're willing to call areas contained. But they use these infrared flights to find heat that's like, say right here off of Saddle Peak Road. And crews will actually go out and look for these hot spots on the ground. So you can see there's still a lot of scattered heat, but really it's isolated heat, right? And they're not going to worry too much about heat that's way out in the middle of the fire where it's surrounded with black. They're worried about the stuff that's right near the edge. So let's just kind of get our bearings here again. So here's Topanga. Here's Topanga Oaks, Wildwood. And so this red line here is the perimeter of the fire. And the blue line is where that Palisades Fire had burned 3 years ago. And so you can see that this red line of our fire, it didn't really burn very far into that Palisades Fire. And you can see just that there's not a lot of fuel out there if you zoom in. Like, there's kind of low brush, but like compared to the areas outside of that, like over here, like this is the difference in the fuel loading between the area that burned in the Palisades Fire, the first one in 2021 versus now in an area that hasn't burned at all. So you can see there's a lot less shrubs and just a lot less fuel. And so that's one of the reasons that the fire didn't really actually make it very far coming this way into the Palisades Fire. So we can see here kind of above Topanga Oaks, the firefight got a lot kind of more complex because they were kind of working these bridgetop dozer lines. But then when they got over here, right out on the margin of the town, like they had to kind of create retardant and hand lines down and kind of chase the fire around the edge of the community. But an amazing job here of keeping the fire out of Topanga Oaks. And just really kind of crazy rugged topography, right? So when you look at how steep this hand line is here, it's just basically rock climbing to put a fire line in here. Like it's wild. wildwood, the hand crews ended up working. So the fire was kind of held on the east side of the road there, down Topanga Canyon Road, and then crossed and kind of, we've got this other kind of ragged edge here above Fernwood. Now we're looking back out to the ocean. So looking at the progression here, a lot of the fire spread here really got here on, like in the first day, the first full day of burning, a lot of this green was already burned. The fire burned all the way to the ridge. And so after that, it was barely backing. You can see that it just gained, you know, like a couple hundred feet per day for 2 days. And just gained a little bit of sliver there, you know, like, but for the most part, the fire had really like run its course in the first day and a half. A lot of this green area all burned in that first day and a half. And then it backed in here towards Fernwood a bit. As soon as the winds died down a little bit, they were able to get helicopters, and they really concentrated the helicopter action here on day 3 around Fernwood and Wildwood. But a lot of this area here was pretty much done after the first night, up kind of towards Saddle Peak. This area here above on the far kind of northwest corner of the fire, above Monte Nido, it stayed active for like 3 days, and it burned back down towards kind of Piuma Road. Farther down here on this flank, the fire, basically this area here is the Franklin fire. And that burned earlier in the last year, in November. So you can see that this fire barely kind of made it into the Franklin fire, into the Franklin fire scar. But that scar kind of held up the fire and kept it from burning down into the center of Malibu. And one of the ways you can tell that it just kind of went out with a lot of help is you don't see any retardant on the ground here. And you don't see a lot of dozer lines. You know, you see the fire just, see the fire's edge, but you don't see like, it's not like the other parts of the fire where you see a ton of retardant. Up here above Monte Nido, there was some retardant used to slow it as it spread. But people actually have to go out and like hike these hills to, what we'd say, you know, tie this in to, when we talk about like containment, it's like crews you have to get water out here, or you have to get crews out there, and they have to go along the entire edge of the fire here and make sure it's completely out. It's not smoldering in these little, you know, and this is like goat country, like as far as it's just, you can tell how steep it is. So pretty incredibly difficult places to fight fire. I mean, look at these ridges. This is exaggerated a little in this program just for the topography, but it's still just crazy rough. So I think when you hear like things like, oh, the fire department was underprepared, if they'd had, you know, more engines available, etc., they would have, you know, contained it quicker. But a lot of that stuff is just kind of, a lot of firefighting happens in places where you kind of have to wait for the fire to come to you. So do you see out in here just, you know, huge number of burnt structures. When you look at this spot on the topography, like gaps in the mountains are dangerous places to live because they funnel the winds. So when you look at a place like this, in some of the kind of most fire-prone vegetation in the world, and you look at like the wind's eye view of this, like this is a crazy place to live. Like absolutely insane place to live from a fire hazard perspective. We talk about like, you know, and I'm sure, I mean, it's amazing. Like who wouldn't want to live with that view? But when you talk about like mitigating places on the landscape, like some places it's like, good luck, man. Like in this wind gap, in heavy brush, with terrible access, and no, like, and then it's like, well, how could we run out of water? It's like, well, you're up on top of a freaking mountain with no rivers around. Like, I got a water tank. It's freaking crazy. Like, so I just saw that Gavin Newsom's like suspending all these environmental regulations, and potentially they can suspend like parts of the building code that are cumbersome to fast track the rebuild. Everyone's bending over backwards to like rebuild everything, and I think most of you have seen now the video we did on fire history of this area, but I think it's worth replaying real quick. How often there's fires in Malibu. So this is a Franklin fire, and then we're just going to go back to like central Malibu here, and we're going to look at the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. So that's one big fire per decade. 1960s. So this has now burned 4 times in 4 decades. 70s. This has burned 5 times in 5 decades. 80s. 6 times. This place here, Central Malibu, 6 times in 6 decades. 7 times there. Maybe 8 times. 9 times. Right. 9 times. This place has burned 9 times. And we're like bending over backwards to like rebuild these houses. Like, are you kidding me? Like, if you're going to plan on living there for a decade, like, the odds are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Odds are about 10 out of 10 that you're going to have a fire there, right? So, crazy. It's crazy. Like, I'm not building a house there. I can't afford to build a house once, let alone once a decade. So anyway, that's the basic unfolding of this incident. Want to give a shout out to the folks, MAXAR, that make this imagery available for free after incidents like this. So we can come and some houses survived there, but most of them didn't. We'll come back and just look at a little bit of Palisades, Pacific Palisades. If your house burned down Pacific Palisades and you don't want to see the carnage, then this is a good time to stop watching, because it's pretty carnagey. And there's a few places that didn't burn in here. But as we said with our talk with Michael Steinberg the other day, this is Palisades Village, and it's very carnaged, and it's just completely carnaged. Yeah, the fire started up here, came down into here about 3:30 p.m. and on the first night, and by 7 it was all the way kind of down down into here. And if you watch the video from Steinberg, we just we look at I think it's useful to kind of look at the pre and post configuration as far as the winds were coming this way, and these fires just went house to house. And so as far as fast tracking the rebuild, there's not much you can do differently, right? So like this neighborhood here, we talked on the very first day, before the fire even got here, we were looking at this and saying like, oh, this is no good. This neighborhood is aligned with the prevailing winds, and the fire's just going to burn house to house to house. And so that's what's happened. And we're going to rebuild house to house to house, probably, there's not, the lots just aren't big enough to do anything else, right? Like, you look at these lots, and the houses can be rebuilt under this new, the new governor's order. You can build 110% of the previous square footage. So the houses already took up most of the lot, but you can build a little bigger when you rebuild. because why not? Anyway, when you've got these crazy steep places like this, you don't have access to like get in there and cut brush. We've talked about that a lot. So this whole fast track the rebuild seems crazy to me when you're just setting up the next one. Yeah, modern building materials will like make things more resilient, but once one house is on fire, like, it doesn't matter if you've got stucco siding. If you look at a lot of these houses that were already built, a lot of them already had, stucco, fire resistant siding, etc. Anyway, so that's it pretty much. It's our own little war zone. This is we're looking at the charter school here, and good portion of it burned. We can't tell if the whole building burned, but this, on that first night we saw that the fire ran down this Temescal Canyon to the ocean, and that's just kind of one of the problems with Pacific Palisades is you've got all these gullies. Like right now, we're basically taking the wind's eye view of how the wind moves over the landscape. It goes down through the gaps, and that's going to keep happening. And so a lot of these neighborhoods are just set up perfectly for the fire just to blow through. So we don't have any imagery for Altadena fire, and also the Eden fire, and also that fire just moved too fast really for the mapping to keep up. And so it's a little harder for us to do something like that over there. But what I wanted to pull up just on that topic of Altadena is over there we see kind of mixed severity in the fire, and here also in these canyons we see that the riparian areas in the bottoms of these canyons survive the fire. The green strips here are surviving riparian vegetation. And if we go to the fire over here in Altadena, you can see that a lot of the vegetation up in the higher elevations here did survive the fire. So I started to talk a little bit about technology. You're just going to see a lot of kind of tech folks proposing kind of new technologies that they promise will stop this from happening or make it better. And a lot of the technology we have right now is great as far as the real-time mapping, and there's been a lot of advancements there. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that, like, during my career, when I started my career, we didn't have jet-powered air tankers that dropped 8,000 gallons. We didn't have real-time infrared mapping. We didn't have, like, tracking of individual firefighters or any of that. Yet the fires have grown, like, exponentially over the last 3 decades. And so to me that says something about, like, we've greatly increased kind of the technical firepower in our firefighting in the last 30 years, and yet our fires get bigger and bigger. And the phenomenon here with the mountain wave effect of the super strong winds, when I was talking to Michael Steinberg and looking at his videos, like, you could see road signs in the in his videos that were like bent at like a 30-degree angle. Those are like engineered to like take 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So this storm would have been really damaging to Altadena even without a forest fire burning. And so we just run into these kind of natural limits in our ability to build, cities that can stand up to these are our hurricanes, these are our tornadoes. And so I'd say just beware of folks that are telling you that, like their satellite heat detection is going to make a difference. Because no amount of firepower at the initial attack of this fire was going to stop it. And once it was burning, nothing was going to stop it. I'm not saying that there's not room for improvement. I'm not saying that more homes could have been saved if the water system was 100 times larger, or if, I'm not saying that there's not room for improvement. But I'm just saying that the fundamental mechanics of how fires spread in these landscapes and in these types of fuels that we have here, they exceed kind of technical solutions, right? And so, but you're gonna see a lot of folks rolling out new technical solutions, new proposals, new gadgets, proposing bigger budgets for more airplanes and everything else. But that's no substitute for better planning, for home hardening, and for kind of reconsideration of how we perceive our relationship with fire. The technical improvements can help, but they're not a substitute for us actually learning the lessons, right? So when I see Gavin Newsom put up this tweet that, we got this executive order here that suspends environmental review and coastal act permitting. Like that's not all bad. Like, yeah, a lot of that stuff's burdensome, but direct state agencies to streamline the building code to make it more affordable and accelerate rebuilding. Like, that's not a long-term strategic plan. Like, that's kicking the problem down the road. Rebuilding Pacific Palisades the way it was before, it was just kind of like delaying the next tragedy, saying like, 30 or 40 years from now, it'll burn down again, but we'll all be dead. So for now, let's get reelected and make it look like we really care about these people who got hurt. Oh man, I gotta stop. All right. Well, that's your progression of the fire, and thanks for supporting the Lookout. If you want to dig deeper into this kind of stuff we talk about, check out the Lookout webpage. We appreciate all your support, and you can buy a camo Lookout hat while you're there. But what we have on here is kind of the education section of our archive, and we have all kinds of stuff. We have stuff on cultural burning, fire behavior, prescribed fire, fire mapping, fire technology. We've got a couple hundred posts on this site, and all of them have something that could help you learn about how to have a better relationship with fire. So, like I said, appreciate your support, and consider becoming a subscriber here on the Lookout. Thanks, everyone. See you later.